It took my father 4 minutes to tell me I had to be at my sister's wedding. Not ask. Not wonder where I'd been. Just tell. He didn't know I had moved across the country 6 months ago. He didn't notice I'd vanished. But now, when they needed a full family photo, suddenly I mattered again. I stood in my quiet kitchen in San Mateo barefoot on cool tile watching steam curl from my second cup of coffee. And for the first time in years, I felt no guilt, no ache. Just a quiet knowing that this time I wouldn't go back. Not for them. Not even for closure. The apartment was small but clean, bright, and quiet. Everything here was mine. The shelf I built, the framed art I picked, the lemon tree on the balcony. It had taken years to get to this place. Not just the apartment, but the stillness. The absence of pressure. The sense of breath. My phone buzzed once, face down on the counter. I didn't look. Probably another Slack message. Then it rang. I reached over without checking the screen and tapped answer. Camille. It took me half a second to place the voice. Sharp male clipped, then my stomach dropped. Dad, there's a dinner this Saturday. You need to come home for it. No hello, no warm-up. Just orders. I blinked, stepping away from the counter. My back leaned slightly against the fridge as I processed his words. What dinner? Sabrina's fiancé's parents are coming in from Florida. They want to meet the family. It's important. For her. For all of us. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I'd forgotten how efficiently he moved through conversations. Everything transactional. Everything strategic. He was always like that. Measured, focused. He liked to pretend it came from discipline. But I'd lived long enough to know it came from control. So let me get this straight. You want me to fly across the country this weekend for a dinner with strangers because it's good optics for Sabrina's engagement. Camille, don't be difficult. I'm not being difficult. I'm asking a basic question. It's your sister's future we're talking about. No, Dad. It's her image, and yours. Not her future. Because if it were about her future, someone might have asked about mine at some point. There was a pause. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds. But long enough for me to look at the microwave clock. 3 minutes into the call. Camille, this isn't the time for whatever this is. What this is, I repeated quietly. Dad, I moved to California 6 months ago. Silence. I let it stretch. What I moved. Packed up everything. Left Raleigh. Took a job here. Signed a lease. Started over. Why wouldn't you tell us? I didn't think you'd notice. Of course we'd notice, Camille. You're our daughter. Then why didn't you call? For 6 months, we thought you were busy. I was. I still am. You should have told us. Why, you didn't even know where I was living before. Did you ever ask? Do you know what street my last apartment was on? Don't be dramatic. It's not dramatic. It's factual. You don't know where I lived because you never cared enough to ask. You don't know what I do now, or who I work for, or what I've built here. I disappeared, and it took 6 months for anyone to notice. Camille, don't do this. We're trying to plan something important. We're asking you to be part of it. That's not unreasonable. You're not asking. You're demanding. Just like always. There was another pause, longer this time. I closed my eyes and exhaled. What's your address? I actually laughed out loud. Excuse me, we need to know where you are. For emergencies. You've had 30 years of emergencies you didn't show up for. Why start now? Camille, number, I'm not coming to the dinner. I'm not flying home to pretend like everything's fine. It's not. It hasn't been for a long time. This is about family, number. This is about appearances. And I'm not interested in playing the quiet, supportive role for a sister who never saw me as more than a placeholder. You're overreacting. I'm finally reacting. There's a difference. I could hear the edge in his breath now. He was angry, confused, embarrassed, maybe. But none of it came from missing me. It came from losing control. This isn't like you, Camille. You wouldn't know what's like me. You've never asked. I pulled the phone away from my ear and ended the call. The screen went dark. The kitchen was silent again, except for the occasional tick of the fridge. My shoulders dropped. I looked at the timer on the microwave again. 4 minutes and 10 seconds. That was all it took. Not to reconnect, not to apologize, not to say we've missed you or we're proud of you. Just to summon me. I stared at my phone for a few more seconds, then set it down beside my cold coffee and started to laugh. It wasn't a joyful sound. It scraped up from somewhere buried deep and bruised. It was the kind of laugh that trembled out when you realized how absurd everything really was. 6 months. 6 months without a text, a call, a birthday message, a single check-in. But now I mattered. Now Sabrina needed her picture-perfect family lined up for inspection. I walked toward the balcony, pushed the door open, and stepped outside. The view from here still caught me sometimes. Rolling hills in the distance, the sound of traffic humming below, the faint smell of eucalyptus and summer air. I stood there for a long time feeling the sunlight on my face, and I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't going back. I hadn't told anyone, except Maya and Tasha, the exact day I was leaving. Not because I wanted it to be some dramatic escape, but because I didn't want any noise. No explanations, no justifications. I had spent 29 years living in a space where my existence felt like background furniture. Quiet, functional, forgettable. So when the lease was signed, the job offer confirmed, and the boxes taped shut, I left Raleigh the same way I had lived there. Silently. That last morning in North Carolina was cool for late March. The sky was overcast, and the streets were still damp from a spring rain that had swept through the night before. I remember standing in the middle of my living room looking at the stacks of cardboard that lined the wall. None of them were labeled with childhood memories or family heirlooms. Just practical things. My books. My clothes. The coffee maker I saved up for. A blanket I'd bought for myself after one rough week in grad school. Maya was dragging a heavy box, labeled kitchen, across the hardwood floor. Her hair was tied up messily, cheeks flushed from the effort. Tasha came in from the hallway balancing a smaller box on one hip and a bottle of water in the other. "You really packed light," Tasha said, setting the box down near the front door. "I'm not taking the furniture, no point." Maya straightened up, stretching her arms over her head. "I still can't believe you're actually going through with this. California. Damn." I smiled and peeled off the last strip of packing tape on the final box. My hands were dry, the skin rough from days of packing and cleaning. "Yeah, I'm going." We sat down on the floor once everything was stacked. The only furniture left was an old futon I had bought secondhand in college. Maya leaned against it, cracking her water bottle open. "You still haven't told your parents. They don't know I got the job. Or that I even applied." There was a beat of silence. Neither of them said anything. We had been friends for years. They'd seen enough to understand without needing the whole story every time. Tasha looked at me. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not really." She nodded. "They never asked about my life," I added quietly. "Not when I applied to Berkeley. Not when I got my first job. Not when I started designing platforms for education programs. They asked if I'd called Sabrina lately. They asked what she was wearing to the gala. If I mentioned anything I was working on, they'd say that's nice, and then pivot to whatever minor success she had that week. After a while, you learn to stop volunteering your wins. It was Maya who spoke next. "You're not wrong for doing this, Cam. You earned it. You got the job on your own. You planned everything on your own. They don't deserve a front row seat to your life just because it's finally getting good." I bit down on the inside of my cheek. That hit harder than I expected. The job was with Skybeam Systems, a mid-sized AI firm based out of Mountain View. Remote role lead engineer for an accessibility platform in development. When the offer letter hit my inbox, I stared at it for a full 5 minutes. Then I cried. Not because it was perfect or lucrative or a dream job, but because it meant I had options. Real ones. I had signed the lease for my San Mateo apartment the same week. A 1-bedroom on the 4th floor with mountain views if I leaned far enough out of the balcony. Rent was high, but I had saved for years. No vacations, no new shoes unless something had holes. I had lived like I was preparing for an exit I couldn't explain to anyone but myself. California felt like possibility, like distance, like quiet. The first night in the new place, I didn't unpack anything. I slept on the floor with a hoodie rolled under my head, wrapped in a throw blanket, windows cracked open to the night air. It didn't feel lonely, it felt earned. Work started that Monday. I set up my desk near the window, arranged my dual monitors, brought in my tiny potted succulent, and clicked into the onboarding Zoom call like I belonged there. My manager was a woman named Eliza who spoke clearly, listened when people answered, and said thank you more than once. It startled me how easy it was to be treated like a peer. To not be second-guessed, minimized, or interrupted. I wasn't just some girl with a degree and an attitude. I was Camille Hartley, lead accessibility engineer. Weeks passed like sunlight on glass. Steady. Clean. I fell into a rhythm. Grocery shopping on Sundays. Walks through Central Park on Thursdays after work. Saturday mornings at the cafe down the street where they remembered my name and my order. No one from home called. Not even when I updated my LinkedIn. Not even when I posted about joining Skybeam. Not even when my birthday came and went in June. Quiet but peaceful, just me, a sushi platter, and a bouquet of sunflowers I bought for myself. 6 months. 181 days. Not a single text, not a single voicemail, not a missed call blinking on the lock screen. There was a strange freedom in that. No expectations to return. No weight to carry. No pretend smiles. I wasn't missing anything. I was building everything. And then this morning the call came. 4 minutes and 10 seconds. That's all it took for him to demand I come back. Not to check if I was okay. Not to congratulate me on the houseplants that were somehow still alive or the work project that had hit every deliverable early. He called because he needed me to show up. Not for me, for her, for Sabrina. I looked out the window now, the late morning sun climbing higher, casting softer shadows on the apartment floor. The coffee in the mug on the counter was ice cold. I poured it down the sink and started a fresh pot. This wasn't about anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was clarity. And I had waited a long time for that. It started earlier than I like to admit, not the resentment. That came later, layered and quiet. It was the noticing. The slow realization that, in our house, Sabrina wasn't just the baby of the family, she was the center of it. I was 12 when I got my first taste of how the hierarchy worked. I had spent months preparing for the district science fair. Built a model of the San Andreas fault line using recycled wood string and a tiny motorized lever system that could simulate tectonic movement. I won first place. The prize was a certificate, a ribbon, and a handshake from the mayor at the county auditorium. I came home with it chest tight with pride, holding the paper like it was made of gold. My mom barely glanced at it. She was too busy helping Sabrina get ready for her cheer tryouts. Sabrina was 9. She didn't make the squad that year, but the entire week in our household revolved around her practice routine. My dad asked if I had cleaned up my project supplies from the garage. That was it. By the time I was a junior in high school, I had stopped trying to impress them. I kept my achievements to myself. I was top 5 in my class, won 2 math competitions, and started tutoring underclassmen for free. I applied to UC Berkeley without telling them. I wasn't trying to be sneaky. I just didn't want to get my hopes up and have no one notice. When the acceptance letter came, I cried in the bathroom. Full scholarship. Room board, books, everything. I printed the email, folded it 3 times, and slid it under my mother's coffee cup the next morning. She looked at it. She smiled. She said, "That's nice, honey." Then she picked up her phone and called Sabrina to remind her about her appointment at the tanning salon. Prom season was coming up. I deferred my enrollment once. That's a part of the story most people don't know. It was spring. Sabrina was 17 and had just broken up with her boyfriend of 6 months. To hear her talk about it, you would have thought they'd been engaged. She cried for days. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't leave her room. My parents were frantic. "She needs support, Camille. She's fragile right now," my mom said. "You can't leave for school in the middle of this. She'll still be crying when I get back for Thanksgiving. Don't be cruel." I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. But in our house, honesty that didn't favor Sabrina was cruelty. My father sat me down 2 nights later. His tone was calm but absolute. Maybe you should take a semester off. Just one. Help out at home, be here for your sister. Family comes first. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I nodded. And that fall, while my classmates moved into dorms and posted pictures of Welcome Week, I stayed in Raleigh and watched reruns with a girl who spent most of the time scrolling on her phone. By the time I finally started at Berkeley in January, the scholarship had shifted. They held my spot, but the housing was gone. I rented a room in a shared apartment off campus with 3 strangers, all men. I worked evenings at a bookstore and weekends tutoring local high schoolers to cover what the scholarship no longer did. The fallout didn't end there. 2 years later, Sabrina got engaged to a boy named Weston. He had perfect teeth, a nice car, and came from a family that owned 4 auto dealerships. My parents were ecstatic. They threw a backyard engagement party with a catered seafood boil, hired a photographer, printed custom napkins with their names in cursive. It was the same year I was preparing for my final semester. My academic advisor had warned me that I'd need to purchase access to a specialized software program to complete my capstone project. It cost $1,200. I asked my parents if they could help. My dad rubbed his forehead and said things were tight right now. My mom said they had just sent the deposit for Sabrina's wedding venue. I ended up taking out a small private student loan to pay for it. I paid it off 4 years later with interest. The wedding, by the way, didn't happen. Weston cheated on her with a girl he met at a car show in Charlotte. Sabrina spent a month at home crying on the couch. My parents blamed the girl, the dealership, the culture of modern dating. They never once mentioned the $12,000 they lost on non-refundable deposits. And when I asked about it just once, my mother looked at me and said Sabrina was heartbroken. Money can be earned again. Your sister's future was shattered. I nodded even as my chest burned. That wasn't the first time she said something like that, but it was the one I remembered. You're the older one, Camille. You need to understand. That's what being a big sister means. You sacrifice. I carried that word with me like a stone in my pocket. Sacrifice. It followed me into every job interview, every crowded bus ride home from campus, every quiet night eating canned soup at the kitchen table in my 1-bedroom in Oakland, listening to mice skitter in the walls while Sabrina posted stories from her vacation in Mexico. I stopped calling. They didn't seem to notice. At least not until now. Now, with wedding number 2 on the horizon and a new family to impress, suddenly my absence was glaring. Not because they missed me, but because someone might ask about the hole in the picture. It was always about the picture. I stepped into my living room and looked around. Everything was still. The books stacked neatly, the framed prints on the wall, the rug I picked out one Sunday morning with Tasha after brunch. My life quiet and unbothered. This place was mine. All of it. And I wasn't trading it for another seat at Sabrina's table. The email came late at night, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. The subject line was vague, just one word in all caps, family. I almost deleted it without opening, but curiosity got the better of me. My mother's name sat at the top of the thread, the same email address she had used since I was in high school. It had probably been at least a year since she last used it to contact me directly. Inside it was short. Camille, Sabrina's wedding is coming up. The Reeves want to meet you. They're traditional. Family is very important to them. We're all expected to attend the dinner next month in Napa. You need to be there. We're a family. You can't say no. Mom, no greeting, no signature, just expectation. I stared at the screen, reading the last sentence again and again. You can't say no. That phrase didn't come with teeth. It came with something worse. Shame. Obligation. The same tone I had heard all my life. I didn't respond. A few days later, Maya and I met up at our usual coffee spot in downtown Palo Alto. She was sitting outside, laptop open, oversized sunglasses shielding most of her face. She waved as I approached, pushing a cold brew across the table toward me without needing to ask. You look like someone who got a surprise email, she said, not looking up from her screen. I slid into the seat across from her. From my mother. Ah. So a cursed email. Apparently the Reeves are big on family unity, which now includes me somehow. Maya closed her laptop and gave me her full attention. The Reeves. That's Sabrina's fiancé family, right? Daniel Reeves. He's a VP of marketing for Pacific Crest Hotels. They have properties all over the country. High-end, pretentious as hell. The family's old money. I think his mom used to be on the board of the ballet company in Charleston. So this is a social climbing event disguised as a wedding. Exactly. And I'm the missing piece in the curated family narrative. Maya sipped her drink. You gonna go number? You sure? Absolutely. They're gonna push. They already are. 2 nights later, I was going through some old folders on my laptop. I had agreed to mentor a younger engineer from our company's internship program and was trying to dig up a keynote deck I made 2 years earlier about women in AI product design. It had been a small internal talk one I gave during a closed leadership summit when I was still in Oakland. I remembered being proud of it. I pulled up the file, opened the deck, and started clicking through the slides. Slide 6 stopped me cold. The phrasing. The structure. A particular quote I had pulled from my old research paper during grad school. I recognized it immediately because it was mine. I minimized the window, opened YouTube, and searched Sabrina Hartley keynote. Her name popped up fast. I clicked on the top result. A slick video titled Leading with Empathy uploaded by the marketing firm she worked for in Chicago. The video opened with applause. Sabrina took the stage wearing a sleek navy pantsuit and a headset mic. She smiled, poised and confident. Her voice was polished, deliberate. I watched the first 3 minutes. Then came slide 6. It was almost identical. Same quote. Same visual design. Slightly rearranged bullet points, but the language was unmistakable. My phrasing, my cadence. Even the conclusion sentence was lifted nearly word for word. I paused the video and sat very still. It wasn't the first time she had borrowed things from me. In high school, she used an essay I had written for English Lit and got an A. In college, she wore my blazer to an interview and didn't return it for a year. But this was different. This was my professional work. My voice, my experience rebranded as hers. I watched the rest of the keynote numb. The comment section was full of praise, inspirational. So moving. Loved the personal story about her sister. I laughed under my breath. That story wasn't about me. She had taken one of my anecdotes and reframed it, swapping names and outcomes. In her version, she was the older sister. Grounded. Resilient. The one who encouraged the shy sibling to follow her passion for tech. I closed the laptop. The rage didn't come immediately. It was a slow burn, a crawl beneath the skin. I walked around the apartment, touched the spine of a book, adjusted. The curtains filled my glass with water and didn't drink it. Then I opened my email and wrote 3 words in the subject line. I won't come. I didn't send it. Instead, I called Tasha. She picked up on the second ring, her voice already halfway to laughter. What did Sabrina do now? I told her everything. When I finished, she whistled. That's some peak Sabrina behavior. Do you think Daniel knows? About the video theft? About any of it? Tasha hesitated. Honestly, probably not. But if this is what she's bringing into a marriage with people like the Reeves, it's gonna bite her eventually. That's not my concern. Number. But it's interesting, isn't it? I leaned back on the couch. I guess I finally understand why they're pushing so hard. If the Reeves do any digging, they'll find out I exist. They'll want to know why I'm not in the pictures, why I'm not part of the story. And the truth doesn't fit the brand. Exactly. Tasha was quiet for a beat. So, what are you going to do? I'm not going to Napa. At least not as a guest. She laughed. That's my girl. I looked at the clock. It was close to midnight. The apartment was quiet. I could still see the glow of the mountains outside, the window shadows moving gently across the hills. Whatever was coming next, I knew one thing for sure. This time I wasn't the one hiding. I picked up the phone before I could talk myself out of it. My fingers hesitated over the screen for a moment, hovering above her name in my contacts. Margot Whitaker. No emojis. No nickname. Just her full name the way she'd always insisted people use it. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Camille. I was hoping I'd hear from you. Her voice was the same as always. A little raspier now touched with age, but still warm, still sturdy. Like old velvet. I hadn't called her in months. Not because I didn't think about her, I did often, but because I wasn't sure where she stood anymore. Whether she still thought of me as her granddaughter or just a memory that made things inconvenient. Hi, Grandma. You sound tired. Just the usual. There was a pause. She never asked questions right away. She waited. I'm calling because I know they've been pushing you. Ah, so you've heard. They sent an email. But more than that, I know the pattern. She sighed softly. Your mother called me last week. Asked me to talk to you. Said the family needs to present a united front. For appearances. Did you agree? Of course not. The silence between us deepened, not awkward, but waited. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the old bookshelf across the room. A copy of To Kill a Mockingbird leaned sideways next to a cracked mug I hadn't used in years. I'm not going back, I said finally. Not to the house. Not to the rehearsal dinner. Not to be paraded around like a shiny accessory they forgot to polish. I understand. Do you? Yes, sweetheart. I understand more than you think. I didn't raise your mother to behave this way, but I see what she's become. She's chasing an image. Always has been. And Sabrina. Sabrina learned how to curate herself even faster. They erased me, Grandma. They didn't just forget, they deleted me. And now they want me to show up because someone else might notice the missing piece. You're right. I was quiet for a long moment. Hearing that just those 2 words meant more than I expected. She exhaled slowly. I could hear the sound of her fireplace crackling in the background. Probably the same one we sat beside every Christmas growing up. The smell of pine and cinnamon briefly filled my memory. But there's something you should know, she said gently. What? Apparently the Reeves have started asking questions. My stomach tightened. About me. About why they've never heard your name. Why you're not in any of the family photos. Why in all this time Sabrina's never mentioned having a sister. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights blinked below, small constellations wrapped around the hills. And what did they say? Your mother panicked. She told them you were living abroad. That you were too independent to stay close. That's one way to spin it. Margot didn't laugh. Her voice was steady. Camille, you don't owe them anything. You don't owe the Reeves anything either. But I know you. And I know you don't like lies, especially ones that drag your name through the mud. I clenched the edge of the curtain in my hand. They chose to lie. They can deal with the consequences. I know, but I needed to tell you. Because if you decide to say something you should know, the cracks are already forming. You wouldn't be starting the fire. You'd just be letting it burn. I let go of the curtain. Why now? After all this time, why suddenly care what Daniel Reeves' family thinks? Because reputation is the last thing your mother has left. And Sabrina built her image on perfection. On curated, clean stories. No estranged siblings. No family drama. Just glossy photos and perfect speeches. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. They can't stand the idea that I might tell the truth. Or that someone else might find it first. I don't know if I want to expose them. Not like that. You don't have to, sweetheart. But you can stand your ground. You don't need to fight, you just need to be present. Sometimes that's enough. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Camille, I never stopped thinking of you. You're my granddaughter. And I know I wasn't always strong enough to protect you from their choices, but I see you now. And I'm proud. My throat tightened. I looked down at the floor and blinked fast. I missed you. I missed you too. The silence between us this time was softer. I could feel her on the other end, not just as a voice, but as a presence. One of the few that had ever made me feel truly seen. Let me know if you want me there, she said. At whatever you choose to do next. I smiled. Thank you. Good night, Camille. Good night, Grandma. I ended the call and stood there for a long time, phone still in hand. The room was dark except for the streetlight outside casting a pale glow across my desk. They had wanted to hide me. But someone had already started asking where I'd gone. The file came in at 2:17 a.m. A message from Tasha lit up my lock screen short and sharp. Thought you should hear this. I've been holding onto it for a while. I didn't hesitate. I pressed play, tucked my phone beneath the covers, and closed my eyes as Sabrina's voice filled the quiet. It was a recording from a girl's trip years ago, before everything fell apart. The sound of clinking glasses and muffled laughter in the background. Then Sabrina's voice, clear and cutting. Camille's great at math and code and boring stuff. She's the kind of person who'll build an app no one remembers. She doesn't know how to sell it, how to make it sparkle. Bless her heart. The group laughed and someone added something I couldn't quite make out. Then Sabrina again. She's brilliant, sure, but in that dry, quiet way that never makes a headline. I stopped the recording there. The weight of it pressed against my chest, not heavy like a boulder, but sharp like a paper cut in the same spot I kept reopening. I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. I lay there a few minutes staring up at the ceiling until the silence felt heavier than her words. Then I got up, padded barefoot to my desk, and opened my laptop. Tasha sent another message. Also, you might want to check this. Daniel's company used Sabrina's pitch last quarter to launch a new educational platform. Attached was a deck. 27 slides, polished, full of color and buzzwords. But it was mine. Not word for word. Not slide for slide, but unmistakably mine. The title had changed, and Sabrina's name was listed as lead strategist, but I recognized the flow. The problem statements, the solution framework. Even one of the diagrams I doodled in a notebook 3 years ago. I opened my original presentation, the one I'd written during my final year at UC Berkeley, the one I'd pitched to 2 seed investors and never followed up on because life got in the way. I clicked through both files side by side. Her version was shinier, but the bones were mine. The betrayal didn't hurt in the way I expected. It was colder than that. Numb. Like standing outside in snow too long. I had shared that idea with Sabrina in the backseat of a Lyft after Dad's retirement party. I'd been tipsy excited, rambling about educational inequality and tech accessibility. She had nodded, asked follow-up questions, even helped me brainstorm names. And then she took it. Used it. Packaged it with her smile and her voice and her perfect shoes and climbed the ladder. I scrolled down to the final slide. Her signature tagline stared back at me. STEM isn't just science, it's survival. That was mine. I wrote that in the margin of my old physics notebook. I took a breath and closed my laptop. This wasn't about credit anymore. It was about truth. At 7:42 a.m., I called Tasha. You sure you want to do this? She asked. She already did it, I said. I'm just shining a light. I compiled a document. 2 columns, my original content on the left, Sabrina's version on the right. Each similarity highlighted. I added dates, version history, metadata. I included the audio file transcribed and timestamped. Then I wrote a short summary. No adjectives. No emotion. Just facts. Subject: intellectual property overlap regarding recent pitch by Sabrina Prescott. I read it twice, then sent it to Maya. Maya Cooper wasn't just any freelance journalist. She specialized in stories about corporate ethics and tech whistleblowers. She'd written a piece on founder fraud that went viral last year. I met her through a mutual connection in Oakland. We had coffee once. I remembered her saying, if you ever have a story no one wants told, send it my way. I didn't include a message in the body, just the attachment. The subject line was enough. Then I sat back and waited. Outside the sky was a soft gray, the kind that never quite decides if it wants to rain. I made coffee black. My phone stayed quiet. My inbox too. By late afternoon, I got a reply. Received. Reviewing. Follow-up questions to come. That was all, but it was enough. Sabrina had always said I was too quiet, too soft, that I needed to speak up if I wanted to matter. She was right about one thing. But this time I wasn't raising my voice for her approval. I wasn't trying to be seen at her table. I was setting the record straight. And I was just getting started. The phone buzzed at midnight. Again at 1203. And then at 1207. I didn't need to check to know it was them. My parents had a pattern relentless when things slipped out of their control. By the time I turned off the buzzing, there were 14 missed calls and 6 voicemails. The last text was from my father, short and sharp. "You need to stop this. We're sending something for you to sign." At breakfast, I scrolled through their messages in silence. Some begged. Some threatened. And one stood out. "We're attaching a non-disclosure agreement to protect the family's image. Please sign and return immediately." Attached was a full-page NDA with legal boilerplate barely veiled as concern. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I pulled up a different email. One I'd kept for a long time. A message from Sabrina to her executive assistant dated 8 months ago. It included the speech she delivered at her promotion party where she had quoted a line almost word for word from a draft I'd written for a company-wide STEM initiative. I had sent her that draft 3 years ago asking for feedback when I was still naive enough to think she wanted me to succeed. She never responded. She just lifted it, brushed off the title, changed the closing paragraph, and passed it off as her own brilliance. I forwarded the email adding a side-by-side comparison I had recently assembled. On one side, my original deck with timestamps. On the other, her speech. Same metaphors, same framework. Same core message about closing the gender gap in tech. To Maya. To Daniel's mother Elise. And to the director of PR at the Reeves Hospitality Group. Then I closed the laptop and went to the beach. By late afternoon, the ripples had begun. A news alert pinged onto my screen, engagement gala for Reeves Air postponed. No explanation. Just a blurry photo of Sabrina looking tense as she exited a building in Soma. At sunset, I got a call from a New York number. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The voicemail came through anyway. My mother's voice barely holding itself together. "Camille, what are you doing? You're ruining everything. This is your sister's future." My future was never something she considered. By evening, I received a flurry of LinkedIn notifications. People had started searching for me, some from Daniel's company, some from Sabrina's, even one from an editor at a startup journal. Then came the text from Tasha. "The gala's off. Word is Daniel confronted her. She's not taking it well." I typed a reply, then deleted it. Instead, I pulled up a note I had kept for myself. It was titled simply "If They Ever Ask." Inside were screenshots, emails, voice memos, a picture of a family Christmas card that included only Sabrina, my parents, and the Reeves, with a golden retriever that wasn't ours. They had scrubbed me from the narrative long before I fought back. Now the house of cards was shaking. At midnight, another email arrived. This one from Sabrina herself. Subject enough. She wrote 3 paragraphs of fury and desperation. How I was embarrassing her. How I was destroying years of her work. How she always looked out for me. Then one line stood out. "Don't think Daniel will stay with someone who tears down her own family." The irony of it made me laugh. Not a big laugh. Just that quiet breath-out sort that comes when someone still thinks they have power over you. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a blank document and started writing something new. Not a retaliation. Not a threat. Just a clear timeline. Who knew what? When they knew it. What they chose to do. And what I had done instead. Not to be petty. To be precise. Because facts have a weight of their own, and once they're out, they don't go back into silence. That week, Daniel quietly unfollowed Sabrina on social media. Elise took down the engagement announcement, and a reporter from Tech Women reached out asking for a comment. I wasn't sure I wanted to give one, but I had a feeling they were going to write about it anyway. By Friday, Sabrina's team posted a carefully worded update. Due to a scheduling conflict, the wedding events would be delayed. They thanked their guests for their patience. There was no mention of me, but in their silence I saw it. They weren't angry anymore. They were afraid. And they had every reason to be. I turned off my phone. Not in a dramatic throw it into the ocean kind of way. I just powered it down and left it in the glove compartment of my rental car. Then I started driving up the coast, letting the winding cliffs of Highway 1 carry me north away from the noise, the calls, the questions. I didn't have to say anything. That was the point. The Monterey sun was pale when I arrived in Big Sur, bleeding through layers of fog like it wasn't sure it wanted to be seen. I checked into a tiny cabin with no television, no Wi-Fi, and only a barely there cell signal. It felt right. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I felt anonymous. Untraceable. Free. I hiked down toward the water where the cliffs dropped into a restless sea. Waves pounded the rocks like they had something to prove. I sat on a wide stone near the edge, pulled my knees to my chest, and just watched. No podcast. No distraction. Just wind in my hair and the sound of the Pacific trying to erase the land. When my phone buzzed later that night after I'd broken my silence to check it, it wasn't from my parents. Or Sabrina. It was Tasha. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "You picked the worst time to go off-grid," she said without greeting. It was her version of "I miss you." I smiled. That bad worse. She lowered her voice like someone could be listening. "There's panic. Real panic. Someone from Daniel's team leaked that the wedding might be postponed. Sabrina's freaking out. Your mom sent out a family-wide email telling people to ignore the rumors. And the article I asked, even though I already knew." She took a breath. "It's live. Front page of West Coast Ledger's online edition." Maya went hard. The title is "The Sister They Erased," and the letter she never wrote. I closed my eyes. I could see it without seeing it. The photo of me at 16 standing at a robotics competition, smiling wide, unaware of the years ahead. The side-by-side comparison of the original STEM app pitch deck in my email folder and the version Sabrina used at that corporate summit. And the letter I never actually sent, the one Maya reconstructed from fragments of what I'd shared. She did it with grace. No rage, no finger-pointing, just the quiet devastation of a life rewritten. Tasha kept talking. "They're all calling it a betrayal from inside the house. Camille, they know someone sent Maya those files." I leaned back against the cabin wall, watching the stars spread out in a slow-motion shimmer above the treetops. "Let them guess," I said. My voice was steady. "They won't have to guess for long. People are putting it together. Your name's trending in niche circles. Erased engineer is what one tech blog called you." I gave a soft laugh. "Catchy." There was a pause. "Are you okay?" Tasha asked. I considered lying, but then I remembered this was Tasha. "I'm not angry. I'm not even hurt anymore. I just see it now. All of it. The years I spent trying to earn a seat at a table that was always going to be pulled out from under me." I heard her exhale on the other end. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "I let the truth do its thing." The next morning I walked to a tiny bakery off the highway and bought a coffee and a fresh peach galette. No one recognized me. No one whispered. No one asked me to explain myself. I sat by the window watching a couple in hiking boots argue about trail directions, and I felt oddly at peace. Back in the cabin, I opened my laptop and checked the Ledger article. Maya's writing was clean, sharp, and undeniable. She hadn't named me explicitly, but anyone with half a brain and access to LinkedIn could figure it out. There was a paragraph that stood out. "In the shadow of a perfect daughter narrative lies a woman whose ideas were borrowed, whose voice was muted, and whose story was never invited to the wedding. Until now." I closed the screen and breathed out. That afternoon the messages began again. My father's number. Then my mother's, Pras. Then a new one, an assistant from the Reeves family. They all danced around the same theme: damage control. "We need to talk. This isn't how families fix things. Let's be civil. Please don't destroy this moment for your sister." I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to Pfeiffer Beach and walked along the shore until the sun turned everything gold. I picked up a smooth piece of driftwood and traced circles in the sand with it. A group of girls nearby were laughing, tossing seaweed like jump ropes. One of them reminded me of myself at 10 before I learned to shrink to make space for Sabrina. I whispered into the wind. Not anymore. That night I texted Maya one line. Let it breathe. Don't publish follow-ups yet. She replied with a thumbs up and a heart. Simple. Respectful. No pressure. I knew silence would make them more afraid than any outburst ever could. And I wasn't finished watching the ripple. Just yet. I stayed in Big Sur for 2 more days. I read. I hiked. I did yoga on the deck at sunrise and let my body remember it existed outside of fight or flight mode. When I drove back down the coast past the fields and cliffs and whispering cypress trees, I didn't feel like I was returning from hiding. I felt like I'd sent a signal flare. And the smoke was still rising. The wedding went on. From what I heard, it was smaller than planned. A few sponsors pulled out. The catering firm scaled back their full-service team. The custom-imported orchids never made it through customs. It wasn't a disaster, but it was clear something had shifted. The shimmer dulled. The spotlight dimmed. Tasha sent me a photo that morning. A wide shot of the ceremony, Daniel standing stiff in his tuxedo, Sabrina in a sleek white gown that looked less couture than expected. And next to her, on the left side of the raised platform, was an empty chair. It was ornate, gold-trimmed, slightly taller than the others. Not a decoration. A placeholder. That was supposed to be me. Not as maid of honor, not as a bridesmaid. Just the sister. The one they assumed would show smile and blend in like a good second act to Sabrina's show. But I never RSVP'd, I never booked a flight. I never even opened the official invite. Tasha's text followed the photo. Guess which chair no one will make eye contact with today. I stared at the image for a long time. Not out of guilt. Just something quieter, like acknowledgement. They had carved out a place for me. Too little too late. Apparently the guests noticed too. The whispers started early. A few of the cousins asked around. One even called my old number, which was still out of service. There were theories. That I had a medical emergency, that I was out of the country. That I'd chosen to protest quietly. A great aunt reportedly said during cocktail hour loud enough to carry across the lawn. If I were her, I wouldn't have come back either. Daniel's jaw was tight in every photo. The kind of tight you can't retouch. His PR team had tried to get ahead of the story, downplaying the article in the Ledger. But the internet never forgets. The Reddit threads had already sprouted branches. Some wondered if the groom knew. Some speculated about the app and the investors. The hashtag number sister raised popped up beneath the wedding post on Sabrina's bridal Instagram account before the comments were turned off. I didn't watch the live stream. I heard it was choppy anyway. The ceremony lagged halfway through. Sabrina's vows got cut off mid-sentence and didn't buffer back. Someone joked online that even the Wi-Fi had taken sides. Later that evening, I sat on the deck of my apartment in Seattle watching the twilight creep in. I didn't feel like celebrating. I didn't feel like mourning. I just breathed in the quiet. No parties, no matching robes, no forced toasts. My laptop buzzed with a new email. I opened it without checking the sender. From Margaret Whitaker, subject. Today, I paused. Margaret was my grandmother on my father's side. Not the warmest woman in the family, but the sharpest. A retired federal judge with impeccable handwriting and a mind like a steel trap. She hadn't spoken to me since the last Christmas we all pretended to get along. The message was short. Camille, they thought losing you would humble them. But you were never the warning, you are the loss. And they will feel it for the rest of their lives. Love, Grandma. I blinked. Reread it. Not a word wasted. No pity. No passive-aggressive tone, just truth plain and precise. The kind of verdict she was known for. I replied with a simple thank you. Somehow, it mattered. Back in Ridgefield, the reception dragged on. I saw snippets through Tasha's updates. One clip showed Sabrina trying to give a speech, but her voice cracked when she mentioned family. Her maid of honor patted her arm. The DJ started the music early. At some point during dinner, my uncle leaned toward my dad and said something that made him look down at his plate. The table went quiet, No one lifted their glass. The final group photo was taken in front of a floral arch. Everyone arranged themselves around the couple. But when it came time for the immediate family photo, the photographer hesitated. "Should we leave the chair?" My mother nodded. "Yes," she said. "Leave it." And so they did. There it was, dead center of the image. A single gold chair unoccupied, surrounded by forced smiles, a visual pause, a silent question. By midnight, the photos had begun circulating. Not the professional ones. The ones taken by guests. Zoomed in, cropped, captioned. One went viral on Twitter. It showed Sabrina alone, for a moment, veil blown slightly to the side, staring at the chair like she was waiting for someone to materialize. The tweet read, "She got the wedding. She didn't get the sister." I shut the laptop, made tea, and sat by the window. Rain started tapping gently against the glass. It wasn't vengeance I felt. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was distance. Clear and wide. Like standing on the other side of a bridge I never had to cross again. It started with a memo that leaked online. 1 week after the wedding, a screenshot from Sterling and Blythe's internal HR system surfaced on Reddit. It was marked confidential and time-stamped 2 days after the ceremony. The memo confirmed that Sabrina Whittaker, Senior Vice President of Brand Strategy, had been placed on indefinite leave pending investigation into professional misconduct. The post exploded in less than an hour. Someone cross-referenced dates and found a marketing brief that Sabrina had submitted 6 months ago. The document included entire pages lifted directly from an unpublished pitch deck authored by another firm. Word for word. Same formatting. Same headline styles. Even the typos matched. By mid-afternoon, news outlets picked it up. A tech blog published an exposé under the headline, "The Golden Girl of Lifestyle Branding is Now Just Another Scandal." Her LinkedIn page quietly disappeared. Sterling and Blythe issued a formal statement calling it a deeply disappointing breach of ethics. The next day, I got a call from Tasha. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Daniel moved out." I blinked. "Already?" She sighed. "His team convinced him to distance while they review prenup clauses. PR damage control. He's apparently in Palo Alto staying at his brother's guest house." There was a beat of silence. Then she added, "Also, your parents called me 3 times. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Let me guess. They want a quote. A denial, a family statement. Bingo. And maybe a little sympathy for their struggling daughter." I hung up and didn't respond until the next morning. Sure enough, my phone buzzed before sunrise. First it was a voicemail from my mother, then one from my father. "Camille, sweetheart, this has gone too far. Sabrina's being ripped apart online. It's getting personal. People are saying things that aren't even true." Another message followed. "Please, honey. Just one post. Just say you two have spoken. That you believe in your sister's integrity. That this was all a misunderstanding." I didn't reply immediately. I sat at my kitchen counter with a cup of black coffee, watching the fog roll in from Elliott Bay. The messages kept coming. Guilt dressed as concern, nostalgia posing as logic. "Remember your first dance recital, Camille? Remember how Sabrina brought you flowers? Your grandmother wouldn't want this. Think about the family." I finished my coffee in silence. Then I typed a single message into the family group thread. "I haven't said anything, and the truth is still speaking just fine." I didn't wait for a response. Later that day, an op-ed ran in the Seattle Gazette. The writer, a former marketing executive, analyzed the dangers of nepotism in branding leadership. Sabrina's name was referenced twice. Camille Whittaker, it noted, had yet to comment publicly. I didn't need to. A few former employees of Sterling and Blythe shared stories on Twitter. About meetings where Sabrina had cut off junior creatives. About how she'd pushed through half-baked campaigns using borrowed concepts and blurred sources. About how she'd bragged that her family name would outlast any accusation. Daniel stayed quiet. Completely. No posts, no statements. His silence was louder than any scandal. A week passed. Then 2. My mother sent a long email. No greeting. Just 5 paragraphs trying to explain. She was under pressure. Everyone copied things these days. It wasn't malicious. She thought you wouldn't mind. She was proud of your style. That's why she used it. I didn't respond. Instead, I reread Grandma Margaret's message. You are the loss. And they will feel it for the rest of their lives. One evening I walked into the local bookstore just to browse. Nothing serious, just to feel the weight of new pages in my hands. As I wandered into the nonfiction section, I overheard 2 women talking near a display table. One said, "That's the sister, right? The one they erased." The other replied, "Yeah." And she never said a word. Just sat back and let the house fall. I picked up a book and walked away before they noticed me. Outside, the city was buzzing as usual. Coffee shops, buskers, bike couriers weaving between lanes. I slipped on my coat and headed home, not because I was tired, but because peace had become my new currency. Let them wonder. Let them guess. I was no longer part of their narrative. I had learned something they hadn't. You don't have to light a fire, you just have to stop holding up the walls. The house sat at the end of a quiet street in San Mateo, tucked beneath a pair of red maples that turned crimson every fall. 3 bedrooms. A small backyard with a sloping hill and a citrus tree that, to my surprise, still produced sweet oranges in early winter. The view from the upstairs window overlooked the Santa Cruz Mountains, soft and endless. It wasn't grand, it wasn't viral. No marble staircase or crystal chandeliers. Just a white kitchen with checkered tiles and a dining nook with morning light, and it was mine. The day I signed the deed, the notary looked up from the final page and smiled. "Congratulations, Miss Whitaker." I nodded, a strange warmth rising in my chest. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not even Tasha. The decision felt too intimate, too rooted in something I was still learning to name. 2 days later, she showed up with flowers and a toolkit. "You finally picked the one, huh?" I grinned as I let her in. "You don't pick a house like this, you let it pick you." Together we unpacked boxes, rearranged the mismatched furniture I brought from the rental, and laughed when the first drawer in the kitchen fell off its track. By sunset, she was barefoot in the living room, holding a hammer in one hand and a framed photograph in the other. "Where do you want this?" It was the picture we'd taken in Big Sur. I was holding a coffee mug, my hoodie soaked with sea spray. She was laughing mid-bite, half of a donut hanging from her mouth. Behind us, the cliffs and ocean stretched into mist. Put it over the fireplace. It went up with 2 firm taps. Crooked. Perfect. Later that evening, I stood alone in the kitchen sorting through the last of the envelopes. Most were utility notices or change of address confirmations. Then at the bottom of the stack I found the familiar handwriting. My father's. Inside, a folded letter in shaky cursive. "Camille, I know we failed you. We failed your trust, your work, your voice. I don't expect you to forgive. But I hope someday you might understand." Next came my mother's email. Longer. Dramatic. Full of memories from my childhood. She attached a photo of me at age 7 standing in front of a science fair project made entirely from glitter and foil. "You always were the brilliant one," it read. "I'm sorry we didn't see it clearly enough when it mattered most." Then there was Sabrina's message. "Camille, I've lost more than I thought possible. But losing you, it's the kind of silence that echoes. I'm sorry, not just for the wedding. For everything before it, I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I opened the drawer next to the sink, took out a binder clip, and pinned all 3 messages to the bulletin board in my home office. A new space I had carved out beside the window that looked out over the backyard. On the left side of the board hung my framed certificate. Women in Tech. Top 30, under 30. The one my mother once dismissed as a nice little award. I had always kept it in a drawer. But now it hung at eye level. Not for show. For remembrance. 3 days after settling in, a thick envelope arrived from a law firm I recognized. Owens and Langley. The firm our family had used for decades. Inside, a formal letter printed on ivory stationery. This letter is to request, on behalf of the Whitaker estate and associated members, your agreement to refrain from further sharing of sensitive or potentially damaging information regarding past family events, both publicly and privately. The purpose of this non-disclosure is to preserve familial integrity and avoid additional reputational harm. A draft NDA was attached. 2 pages. Standard language. I sat at my desk and read it twice. No threats, no accusations, just containment. A polite way of saying, "You've said enough, stop now, let us recover." I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I simply took a pushpin and placed it next to the award. No reply, no negotiation. Just a quiet refusal to be silenced again. Outside, the orange tree shifted in the breeze. That night I slept without waking. No dreams, no noise. Just the gentle creak of a house getting used to someone new. A space finally becoming something more than shelter. A space that knew me, held me. A space that didn't need a performance to feel like home. The first morning I woke up in my new house without an alarm, I didn't rush to check my phone. I just lay there for a while, sunlight slanting through the blinds, the scent of orange blossoms drifting in from the backyard. There was no one to impress. No expectations waiting, no performance, just my breath. My bed. My peace. A year had passed since the wedding I didn't attend. Since the family that erased me tried to celebrate without the person who once held it all together. I didn't keep tabs, but news had a way of finding me. Sabrina's company had placed her on administrative leave after an anonymous tip pointed to plagiarized campaign material. The tip included screenshots of internal decks from a Bright Cap pitch I'd written 2 years earlier. She denied it, of course. Said it was all coincidence, but brands began pulling out. Sponsors stayed silent. Within weeks, she disappeared from LinkedIn and Instagram, and the company scrubbed her name from the website. Last I heard, she and Daniel were separated. He had moved back into a bachelor condo in Marina Bay and was spotted on dating apps within a month. Sabrina, according to a former coworker who messaged me out of the blue, hasn't been seen in the office since. My parents tried to call. Left voicemails with forced warmth and deliberate vagueness. "Hi honey, just checking in. Your sister's going through a tough time and, well, family's family, right? Call us." I didn't call. I didn't reply to their emails either, even when they wrote asking me to say something publicly. To clarify that the press had it wrong. That the information was taken out of context, that they'd always supported me. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Instead, I sent one message. "I haven't said anything." And the truth still found its way out. They didn't reply after that. I had no desire for confrontation. No need to argue, to explain, to relive the years they'd rewritten in favor of someone shinier, easier, more convenient. I was too busy living. Tasha and I built a rhythm together, like two people finally allowed to exhale. We worked from our respective corners of the house, pausing mid-afternoon to walk around the neighborhood or tend the tiny garden we'd started behind the orange tree. We laughed a lot. Not the kind of laughter that covers tension. The kind that bubbles up because the world finally feels safe. I started mentoring younger women in tech, something I'd once felt too burnt out to do. One of them, a first-gen college grad from Bakersfield, gave me a handmade thank you card after landing her first full-time engineering job. She wrote, "You made me believe there's space for someone like me." I kept that card beside my desk next to the Women in Tech, top 30 under 30 plaque, and just below the letter from the family's attorney asking me to sign a non-disclosure about sensitive family events. I didn't sign it. I didn't reply. I just pinned it to my corkboard under a sticky note that read, "You owe them nothing." The old version of me might have felt a flicker of guilt. Might have worried what the neighbors thought. Might have drafted a carefully balanced response that protected everyone's image. But that version had retired. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I didn't go around recounting the past like a wound. I didn't need to. Some stories collapse under their own weight when the person holding them up finally walks away. On the anniversary of what would have been Sabrina's first wedding anniversary, I took a solo trip to Mendocino. I stayed in a quiet inn facing the cliffs and wrote for the first time in years, not for a pitch deck, not for strategy, just for myself. I wrote about a girl who once thought being good was the same as being loved. About the slow, painful liberation of realizing they're not the same. And about the woman who stepped into her own name, her own space, her own silence, and let it speak volumes. Back home, I hosted a small dinner for the women I'd mentored. We sat on the patio, fairy lights glowing overhead, sharing stories and pasta and laughter that didn't ask for permission. Someone asked me toward the end of the night what I would say to my family if they ever showed up at my door again. I thought for a moment, then said, nothing. They waited. I smiled. I'm not silent because I'm bitter. I'm silent because I'm finally free. No one clapped. No one needed to. They just understood. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop auditioning for love you've already earned by existing. I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped playing the role they wrote for me. And sometimes that's all it takes for the whole story to fall apart. Thank you for listening. If you've ever felt erased by the people who are supposed to love you the most, know this: walking away is not weakness. It's wisdom. Share this story with someone who needs that reminder.